welcome to Booked, the bookstore education podcast brought to you by the American Booksellers Association. This episode is part of our Free Expression Friday series, an interview series from ABA's American Booksellers for Free Expression, celebrating the amazing work of booksellers, organizers, and book people in general, fighting for the right to read.
This is This Week in Book Challenges, covering the period from November 26th to December 4th. A hearing was held Tuesday in the Ohio House of Representatives on HB 556, a bill removing liability exemptions for teachers and school librarians who, quote, pander obscenity. No vote was held, and the only testimony was by the bill's sponsor, who grossly misrepresented the nature of literature in schools. If passed, the bill would threaten teachers and school librarians with new liability for educational material, remove educational value exemptions, and would certainly create an environment of confusion, fear, and book removals in Ohio's schools, regardless of whether there are legally obscene books in schools. Spoiler, they're not. In Florida, motions for summary judgment were filed in the case against Escambia County by the authors of And Tango Makes Three, a book about two male penguins raising a penguin chick together. In South Carolina, the State Board of Education restricted Crank by Alan Hopkins and requested more information on two additional books. In Texas, a fundraiser gala held by the conservative nonprofit America First Legal raised over $80,000 they claimed would pay Llano County's legal fees in a book ban case. Instead, the Austin American-Statesman claims the funds disappeared and taxpayers footed the bill. Also in Texas, serial book banners at Katy ISD have banned 14 more books, including Slaughterhouse-Five, The Kite Runner, and books by Margaret Atwood. That has been the past week in book challenges. Hey everyone, it's Philomena from ABFE. Normally I bring you an interview with a free expression advocate. This week, I wanted to talk to you directly about some of the legislative trends I'm watching in 2025, and most importantly, what you can do about them. The short version is, 2024 was already bad, and I'm sorry to have to tell you this, but 2025 could be even worse. We need to start preparing now to limit the damage that state legislatures and even Congress could inflict on the right to read in the coming year. Books have been under attack in state legislatures for a long time, and especially since 2021. Last year, we saw a few trends that were especially worrying and could expand in 2025. The first is the rise of statewide book bans in schools and school libraries. Last year, Utah passed HB 29, essentially a three strikes rule that means books banned under certain conditions in 3 public school districts or a combination of public and charter schools is banned statewide. The law is retroactive and has already led to 13 books being banned in schools. Utah was followed by South Carolina, which took a different approach to banning books statewide. Regulations created by the state's Board of Education created a panel of censors that has already banned 7 books and restricted access to an 8th. There's no doubt that other states, especially those who have already passed book ban laws, will take notice. The Texas Board of Education, for example, has already said it wants in on statewide bans. Another threat in 2025 is that more states could mimic HB 900 out of Texas. In 2023, Texas passed HB 900, aka the so-called Reader Act, into law. Alongside school library restrictions, HB 900 would force booksellers and other library material vendors to assign sexual content ratings to books sold to school districts, not only for future book sales, but for all books sold to school districts in the past that are in active use. ABA is a plaintiff in the case against HB 900. The bookseller portions of the bill received a preliminary injunction from the district court, a ruling that was upheld by the Fifth Circuit. As of now, we await a final decision in the case. Still, in 2024, other states introduced bills mimicking the approach. New Hampshire amended its book rating provisions out after the committee heard from booksellers about how it would impact their business. Other bills in South Carolina and Georgia died in committee, but could be reintroduced in the coming year. We need to stay vigilant and be ready to testify against these bills, which are unconstitutional and bad for business. Another trend to watch out for is legislation that would force bookstores and libraries to create adults-only sections. In 2024, Idaho passed HB 710, a bill creating financial liability for libraries that don't recategorize challenged books to a section inaccessible to minors. The difficulty of complying with this law forced some Idaho libraries to simply close their doors to unaccompanied minors unless a guardian signs an affidavit permitting them access. These tactics could also impact booksellers. ABA is a plaintiff in the case against Arkansas's Act 372, a law impacting the sale and display of books deemed harmful to minors, according to an expanded definition that includes any nudity. This law, too, has received a preliminary injunction from a district court. We'll be on the lookout in 2025 for bills that expand harmful to minors definitions and include the mere display of such materials among punishable activities. And unfortunately, bills that have been pre-filed in Texas confirm that we will be busy in 2025. Several bills expand liability for teachers and school librarians, removing exemptions on the basis that they have a valid educational use. It also removes psychiatric and medical exemptions for such material while adding exemptions for law enforcement. For booksellers, however, I am particularly sounding the alarm about SB 88 in Texas. This bill makes surgical changes to the state's harmful to minors laws that could drastically decrease the scope of material Texas booksellers could sell or even display without fear of liability. The bill makes two changes. It shifts the target from material whose dominant theme taken as a whole appeals to prurient or sexual interest and is offensive, to material that can be construed as prurient or offensive at any point. And it changes the third condition of the harmful to minor test from being utterly without redeeming social value for minors to merely being without redeeming social value for minors. In other words, it lowers the bar for liability while raising the bar for exemptions from liability. It is especially essential that judgments of obscenity or harm to minors are limited to works whose dominant theme taken as a whole is seen as obscene or harmful to minors. That can mean the difference between a literary classic and erotica. And it means that out-of-context passages could be used to condemn a work entirely, a strategy that has been popular with book banners who want to ban books without even reading them. And because the law impacts not just the sale but the display of books, it could put Texas booksellers in the same position as Idaho libraries, unable to open their doors to unaccompanied minors for fear of liability. So, what can we do? Against all of these possible vectors of attack, we need to be vigilant. If you are in Texas, start thinking about testifying against this bill or others that impact booksellers. Your best bet will be to explain the harm this statute would do to your business, particularly the costs or the impossibility of creating an adults-only section or checking IDs at the door. Another tactic is to explain how this would impact your ability to sell mainstream books and how that impacts your freedom of expression. But whether you're in Texas or not, we all need to up our game this year in terms of testifying against legislation that affects booksellers' free expression. Make sure you're signed up for our email updates by visiting bookweb.org/advocacy. And if you hear about a bill in your state's legislature that you want to take action against, or just make sure that we're aware of, email abfe@bookweb.org. That's ABFE@bookweb.org. At Winter Institute this year, I'll be holding a workshop about preparing to testify on legislation. In the meantime, I'm happy to help you individually craft your testimony for your state and your store. Again, it's abfe@bookweb.org. Thanks for everything you all do every day to support free literature, and by virtue of that, a free society.
Thank you for listening to Booked, the bookstore education podcast brought to you by the American Booksellers Association. Don't forget to subscribe to the show on your favorite podcast app. Additional educational resources can always be found on the ABA website at www.bookweb.org. Happy reading!